This is Stu Peters. He's kind of like Alex Jones, except he's like a full-blown Nazi. Like, I don't mean just like I don't like him, I'm left-wing, I'm calling a right-winger Nazi. No, I mean he loves Hitler. It's crazy. So I want to listen to what he had to say. In this video, I don't remember what the title of the show was, but I named it Stu Peters Praises Hitler, Says He Was a Hero. So I want to listen to it, see what he had to say here. This is from March 2024. I've been doing a lot of research into World War II lately because I'm writing about it. If you want to check it out, owenmorgan.com. That's where you can find the books. Also, Amazon, of course, and Audible. Before we listen to the video itself, let me show you why I want to talk about it in the first place. Stu Peters went on Fresh and Fit. I don't know if you guys know those dudes. They're like red pill, right-wing, extremist nutcases, basically.
Yesterday, Newsweek called me a pro-Hitler Nazi. Raw Story called me a pro-Hitler Nazi.
Totally fair.
I don't know how these people get away. I mean, they said that I was a Holocaust denier.
Absolutely.
Which is completely false, emphatically false. As a matter of fact, they made up a quote out of whole cloth. And
oh, really? Then sue them if that's true. By the way, that's the video we're going to watch where he says that Hitler is a hero.
Said, Stu Peters said, quote, Hitler is a hero.
He absolutely did.
I have never said any such thing. And they can print this stuff with impunity because the hubris is so...
Well, let's sue them then. If you think that they're like in the legal wrong, that's the American way, baby. Sue, sue, sue. Is it weird to anybody else that this pro-Hitler Nazi who believes that Hitler was a hero isn't suing people for saying he believes that Hitler is a hero? Is that odd to anyone else? Almost like he believes that Hitler is a hero.
Because there's no accountability. And so they did this as a result of me announcing the Extreme Accountability event.
Okay, this is a big thing, but basically he had this big event that he was holding, like a conference or whatever. And when he says extreme accountability, what he means is murder. I'm not joking, being hyperbolic. That's what he means, for real. He was holding an extreme accountability event to talk about how he's going to murder people. In what way, I guess. Or try to rile people up into a blood frenzy where they will do the murdering, I suppose.
Okay. And that's what we are going to, before I take my last breath, we're going to exact extreme accountability on these people for what they're
You catching this?
doing to our kids.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about a tribunal, whether it be military or citizen, and after conviction through a judicial process, whether it be expedient or not, after they are convicted for these crimes, we're going to hang them. I'm dead serious.
Bro, that's psychotic. You are psychotic.
Yeah.
But I didn't even say that in the announcement. What they were so bent about is that I said, hey, in modern day America, we need to bring book burning back. Yesterday, news.
I mean, yeah, that's a pretty psychotic thing to say, but no, that's not what I was bent about. Well, that too, I suppose. I was bent about the fact that he said Hitler is a hero. So let's listen to the video where he says that. It's like 30 minutes long, going to go beginning to end. Like I said, been doing a lot of research on World War II. I should be able to give some cultural context to this whole conversation. Let's check this out.
History is written by the victors. Have you ever heard that said before? History is written by the victors.
Hitler apologia. I can't even believe that I'm about to listen to somebody speak so positively about the dude. Oh my God.
A lot of you have heard that saying, and it's true. And that's why most of the history that we've all learned in the classroom, throughout our lives, on television, especially about World War II, is dumbed down and fake and cartoonish.
Oh boy. I've done so much research on this subject, it's ridiculous over the past 6 months, I would say. I've gotten books that are like not in print anymore, very difficult to find, and I've read through them multiple, not just one. I've read 4,000 pages of like comprehensive biography of Hitler and the people around him, and breakdown of World War II and the whole nine. I know so much about this subject, it's crazy right now. When I move on to another subject for a book, I'll probably, it'll fade away, because I'm not going to continue diving into this, but let's see what Stu Peters gets wrong here.
In the classroom, throughout our lives, on television, especially about World War II, is dumbed down and fake and cartoonish. Don't question it. It has no room for nuance. It's all designed to assert this fake moral superiority that the
German sexology is the picture that he has up here on the right. He's about to complain about the gay and the trans community in Germany during the Weimar Republic. You can see it mentioned there at the bottom, Weimar's sex cult. There was no such thing. Weimar Republic was the democratic government after World War One, but before World War Two. Existed before Hitler took charge. And it was actually really, really good. It was a fantastic government. It's just that, like, Germany was so drunk with nationalism and exceptionalism. We're the best, we're the strongest, we deserve everything. They were so drunk on that it all fell apart. Within only 12 years, it all fell apart, unfortunately. Anyway, while it was in operation, the Weimar Republic, it made a lot of progress in, LGBT studies and stuff. By the way, if you guys can like watch to the end of the video, it'd be really appreciated. That's how YouTube judges if a video should go further, is based on watch time.
Assert this fake moral superiority that the West, and let's not forget our allies in the Bolshevik-run Soviet Union, claim to have had over the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese.
Bolshevik, it means communist, effectively. That's the name of the political party that eventually became communist. And we didn't get along with Stalin, actually. Really didn't like the guy, but we needed his help to do like a, what is it called, a pincer attack on Germany at the end. Germany had conquered the Western Front, taken France and everything, and he came at the Eastern Front, at Russia, and he got some early victories there, and Stalin was really unhappy about it. Then the United States got involved in the war, and beyond that point, it was basically over for Germany. They lost some crucial battles against Russia, and then the U.S. and Russia teamed up to attack Germany both at the same time, basically, right at the end of the war. And after that, of course, like, Germany was split into two segments. There's the West Germany and East Germany segments. Big wall between the two, one kind of controlled by the U.S. government, the Western governments in Europe, and the other controlled by Russia. And, oh God, it was ugly for the Eastern Germans, like on the Russian side. Anyway, we teamed up with them temporarily to take down a shared adversary. And after taking down the shared adversary, Germany, it was over. The alliance was over from that moment forward. It was only so that we could take down Germany. And he's claiming that the United States teamed up with Bolsheviks or whatever, and that's bad. This is nuts, bro.
Union claimed to have had over the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese. And when it comes to World War II, this fake bastardized version of history isn't limited to what happened on the battlefield. No, it spans that entire era of world history, impacting the decades both immediately before and immediately after that war.
Okay, well, lay it on me, Stu.
And it's enforced vigorously. It's enforced like most other things that our ruling regime enforces, by way of social and emotional blackmail, social and emotional terrorism.
What is is he saying that accepting the fact that the Holocaust happened is enforced by emotional blackmail?
Anyone who wants to ask questions, anyone who wants to dig deeper, anyone who wants to learn about the real causes of World War II, the real conditions that led to Adolf Hitler taking power in Germany, is slammed as a revisionist.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I wanted to know the answers to these questions. I went in search. I got books that were legitimately covered up, subjects that were legitimately covered up, specifically the German evangelical church's involvement in World War II and how they aided Hitler in his rise to power. I wanted to know the answers, and I went to legitimate scholars to get those answers. The books that I read didn't tell me the things that happened. They quoted people, quotes that you can, like, go look up yourself. Like, you can go to these museums and look at the pieces of paper that it was written on. Like Victor Klemperer, I think was his name. His diary was one of the most valuable pieces of information that, like, helped us understand what Germany was like during World War I, the Weimar Republic, and World War II. This is what he looks like right here. He fought in World War I. He was deeply nationalistic. He was one of the Jews in Germany that agreed with, all of the German superiority stuff. They're the best and the strongest and the biggest, and they deserve everything. He viewed himself as like one of those Germans, and he was, God, what's the term I'm looking for here? Loyal to the law to a fault. He wouldn't violate the law no matter what. He just followed exactly what he was supposed to do. When people said you need to start putting Israel on the end of your name, so instead of Klemperer, it's Klemperer Israel. When they said that, he started doing it. When they said you need to sew this gold star onto your your shirt, this patch, he did it. When they said you need to mark your storefront as owned by a Jew, he did it. He marked his storefront. When they said you need to give us ownership, the German government said you need to give us ownership of your property, your house, because Jews aren't allowed to own property like that anymore. He said, okay, and he signed it over. He followed the rules to a fault, and they cordoned him off into not just a ghetto, they put him into a tiny little, like 15 by 15 foot room that was so small and cramped that people were literally lying on top of each other when they slept, because there were like 30 people in this room of 15 by 15. And there was no shower, there was no bathroom. They were pissing in a corner of the room. He and his wife lived in this room together. He has been an invaluable source of information for the life that Jews in Germany lived at the time. He gave us so much. When I believe it was Hamburg, I think is where he lived. Where did he live? For some reason, I thought he was in Hamburg, Germany. Well, anyway, Hamburg, Germany was the site of extreme Allied bombing. But Klemperer was also in a town where there was extreme bombing happening from the Allies, and the Allies destroyed the place that he was living in, and he stands up. When I say destroyed, I mean bombers flying over the city dropped so many bombs in different areas that they combined into one gigantic fire. The average temperature of the entire city was 800 degrees, and the fire was raging so much that it was creating hurricane speed winds, sucking oxygen into it. To say it was destroyed is an understatement. That what I just described is Hamburg. Something similar happened where Klemperer was living, and he lost his wife in all of that. Couldn't find her until a few minutes later. She crawls out of rubble. She lived. She survived. She said that after the bombing happened, she was shaking and she wanted to light a cigarette. So she didn't have any matches, so she's looking around because there's fire everywhere, She's looking around for something to light off of it, just lean down and light a piece of wood. And the first thing she saw was a burning human body. She lit her cigarette off of that. Eventually, after the war, they both survived, and she, I think, had a stroke is how she died. Klemperer lost his will to live at that point. All of this is written in his diary. This is how we know all of this stuff. And, his diary is available. You could just go read it. And his diary accounts are backed up by other people's diary accounts. We have, tons of people's diaries on this era in this region. So anyway, he was so distraught when his wife died that he wrote in his diary, "I have nothing left to live for." He did continue living, though, and he found, so I think at this point he's 60 or something, and he found a 25-year-old's wife that married him. There's so much more to this guy's story, it's incredible, but we don't need to go through the whole thing. The point is that you can go just read the guy's diary. You could just go see what it says anytime. What's the diary book called? I'm not actually sure what his diary is called, but the books that I've read on World War II almost unanimously quote his accounts in his diaries. I'm not sure if it's in English either. It may not be. Anyway, it's not overblown. It's not hyperbolic or twisted out of proportion or any of that. We have accounts from people and we know what happened. That's insane that he survived the whole war. I know. Tell me about it, right? He was a Jewish person in Germany during the war and survived. It was crazy. At one point, when he was living in his little place, his little, his 15 by 15 room with like 30 other people or however many it was, at one point, the Germans basically said, you're not allowed to own a typewriter anymore. So he went from using a typewriter to write out his diary entries to just writing them by hand. And God, the story is just incredible. His story was something else. Anyway, let's keep listening to Stu Peters just flat out lie about this shit without knowing like the first thing about any of it.
Taking power in Germany is slammed as a revisionist. Oh, you're noticing something? You have questions?
I did have questions, yes. And they were answered by just like looking in Klemperer's diary and others.
Oh, well, you're a Nazi sympathizer.
Nobody said that about me when I had questions.
Or any number of insults that have been fine-tuned over the years. Fine-tuned to serve as dog whistles with maximum impact, to send all of the useful idiots running toward the truth seeker to shut him down as quickly as they can. To make
the truth seeker
sure that he doesn't influence anyone else with all of his question asking, with any of his noticing. And this gatekeeping of history isn't limited to the classroom or the education system as a whole. No, it is society-wide. People of all ages are intimidated out of doing their own research.
No, they're not. No one is even discouraged from doing research into this. You want to find Klemperer's diary and the other diaries of people in the area? Hell, you want to find Joseph Goebbels' diary? That's available. You can just go there and read it. Goebbels sold the rights, the publishing rights to his diary before he died, and they were going to publish it when he died. And that's what happened. He did. They died, or he died, and they published it. And wouldn't you know it, his diary accounts completely match what Klemperer's diary accounts describe. None of these diary accounts contradict each other. Even diaries from Nazis back up exactly what all of these people said.
When it comes to vaccines, when it comes to anything, especially when it comes to the hellish conditions faced by the people of Weimar Germany, perhaps the most disgusting country in world history, where many of the social experiments that we now and our kids are being subjected to made their debut.
You're talking about being trans, social experiments like being trans. Just absolutely psychotic, bro. I know like a lot about Dr. Mengele too, since he mentions social experiments. I will not say anything that's too disturbing or graphic for YouTube, so you don't have to worry about me going down that weird road. But unfortunately, Mengele, after his experiments on human beings that were just wrong, immoral, horrific, disgusting, he got away with it. He fled to Argentina and lived a long life, got remarried and everything. So disgusting. Anyway, the Weimar Republic was actually the shit. It was a fantastic government. Too bad it only lasted 12 years. If you want more information on this subject, there's I'm not actually sure how many pages it is because I read the ebook copy, but, well, the first one is The Coming of the Third Reich, then The Third Reich in Power, and the third one is The Third Reich at War. And it touches on every single subject about World War II. You want to know about the White Rose Society? It has a little section about it. It may not go into like deep detail about every single subject, but it touches on it. Was Hitler a pagan? It addresses that. What was his religious belief or whatever? It touches everything. So if you want to know more about Otto Klemperer or any of this stuff, it's a good place to start, but it's like 100 hours of audiobook reading or so. Also, Hitler's Pope by John Cornwell. Fantastic book if you want to know how the Catholic Church handled it. So The Third Reich at War, the last of the trilogies, 35-hour audiobook read. Number 2 is 20 hours long. Audiobook is 20. And then The Coming of the Third Reich, the first one is 16 hours, basically. So we're talking 70, 75 hours, somewhere in there, of audiobook reading. And I went through the whole thing. I think it's around 4,000 pages.
The Weimar period in Germany, which lasted from the end of World War I in 1918 to the
It's called Weimar, but okay.
day that Hitler took power in 1933, was a time of complete and total degeneracy.
It was the shit, actually.
Humiliated by their defeat in World War I, the German people were just plunged into poverty. Their money was worthless.
He thinks that was the fault of the Weimar Republic? Actually, the Weimar Republic created a phenomenally good economy. After World War I, Germany dealt with the most dramatic case of hyperinflation ever seen in human history. I'm talking their money went from being worth 2 German marks per US dollar to 4 German marks per US dollar. That means its value got cut in half. And then it went from 4 German marks per US dollar to 8, and then 13. I mean, these are multiples that are destroying people's lives every time they tick up. I wrote about it in my book, The Church in Chains. I think that's the title. I haven't really settled on a title fully yet, but check it out, owenmorgan.com. It's on, or it will be when I release, on Amazon and Audible and everywhere else. But I have a chart of their hyperinflation. 1918 in December, 8. April 1919, 12. 1921, 263. July 1922, 493. Eventually, by December 1923, it was 4.2 trillion German marks per US dollar. Saying that the country was poor is an understatement. I cannot express how absolutely destitute this country was. A girl, again, thanks to diary entries from people, I know this, a girl sold herself for a stick of butter. That's how desperate these people were. Anyway, that was not the fault of the Weimar Republic. You know whose fault that was? It was the nationalistic extremists in the war who believed that they deserved everything, who pushed World War I to be what it was. Primarily Wilhelm II, the emperor of World War I, in 1917 or whatever. It was because of that. And when they stopped fighting World War I, when they lost, they owed reparations to the countries that they hurt, France and others. And those reparations were, they kind of crippled them, like, heavily. They did a lot of economic damage. You know what, though? They kind of had that coming a little bit, right? Anyway, that's what caused the hyperinflation. They came out of it in 1924, though. Didn't take very long. The way they came out of it was they renegotiated the reparations payments to put them off for 5 years. They created a brand new currency. They created a brand new currency. It was no longer the German mark. It was the Reichsmark, I think. Anyway, the new currency was linked to the price of gold. So it was on the gold standard. So it was not subject to inflation. They just didn't have much of it. Anyway, keep listening here. The Weimar Republic was not to blame. It was all the nationalist nutcases. One more thing. In 1924, when they came out of hyperinflation, they had a golden age from 24 until the Great Depression from the stock market crash in 1929. It was an era of incredible prosperity in Germany.
Plunged into poverty. Their money was worthless. The social fabric of their entire country had been completely torn apart. Marxists were deliberately creating the conditions necessary for a perfect and total societal collapse to usher in their Bolshevik agenda.
Actually, that's true. Communists were the predominant enemy to Nazis. They fought them in the streets. They were just as violent as Hitler's brown shirts were.
Sexual perversion was rampant. There were child prostitutes on the streets of Berlin.
That was true because of the hyperinflation, yes.
There were mother-daughter prostitution teams who desperately engaged in
here we go.
unspeakable acts in exchange for their next meal.
Yep, absolutely true. Where did he get this information? Why does he trust that diary account, but not like Otto Klemperer's diary accounts, for example?
And Weimar, of course, was the birthplace of the transgenderism and gay rights movements that have once again reared their ugly heads to plague Western Christian society, especially America.
Under the Weimar Republic, abortion was starting to become more common. Birth control was a lot more common. They had condom vending machines all over the place. It's fantastic. I love it. I love everything about that. And then the Nazis came in and started demonizing birth control and abortion and everything else. They were in favor of abortion if you weren't Aryan. They were opposed to it if you were Aryan. You could like go to jail for aborting an Aryan baby.
All of this was happening with the full blessing of the Weimar government, which was largely controlled by Jews.
What? It was controlled by Jews? Who the hell told you that? Where'd you get that? This is like made up. It was controlled by Germans, first and foremost. Were some of them Jewish? No. You know how many there were? Somewhere in the vicinity of 500 Reichstag members, like Congress members, give or take, in this era. It changed with their population. One Reichstag member per 60,000 people. Anyway, somewhere around 500 Reichstag members. 4 of the 500, 4 had any kind of ties to Judaism at all. Like their grandma was Jewish or something. 4 of them. It was not run by Jews. The government wasn't. This is just like fabricated. Where did he hear that?
The Jews controlled the German court system.
Dude, I'm kind of impressed that I'm just pulling this stuff off the top of my head right now and remembering all this. Jews did not control the court system.
Jews controlled the German banking system.
Oh, that's complicated. Not really. Usury, which is like lending money and getting interest back on it, was banned for Christians, for like Catholics and stuff, for a long time. There was no separation of church and state. So if it was immoral in Christians' eyes, it was illegal, basically. So lending money was illegal in many cases. So Jews stepped into that hole to fill it. Like there were Christian bank leaders or like bank CEOs, and those Christian CEOs hired Jews to manage the money and loan it so that the Christian CEO was not breaking any moral rules about loaning money and getting interest. But the Jews, who gives a shit about them, are violating that moral rule. I don't care about them, though. That was the mindset at the time. So Jews were kind of cordoned off into this one area that they could operate in. They couldn't do anything else. And Stu Peters is using that as like evidence against them or something?
The Jewish people had unprecedented overrepresentation in Germany's government, and they ruled the numerous and hyper-violent communist factions that were
false,
trying to take over the country, both by...
Not true. I'm sorry. Let me step back and listen to the whole thing one more time.
The Jewish people had unprecedented overrepresentation in Germany's government, and they ruled the numerous and hyper-violent communist factions that were trying to take over the country, both by force and at the ballot box.
That's just a lie. Hitler tried to tie Jews to communism, but they weren't communist. By and large, they were members of the Social Democrat Party. There were only 525,000 Jews total in Germany at its height. 0.8% of the population. Germany had a government that was like nearly identical to the United States government today in a lot of ways. And, you know, they had like elections and they had parliament and all of that other stuff. And they had a billion different political parties. They were split up into like the Social Democrats, the Catholic Center Party. I forget the name of the Catholic Center Party. Then they had the Nazi Party, which is like far-right nutcases that were very unpopular, didn't have much support. And then they had the Communist Party on the far left. Communists and Nazis were roughly equal in how dangerous they were to the democracy of the Weimar Republic. They both wanted to destroy the democracy. And so you get like this weird little power play, this weird interaction between all of the political parties, the big influential ones. You had two political parties that did not want democracy, communists and Nazis. Neither of them had enough support to do anything, like have any political sway, because the Catholics were in the mix. Catholics hated communists because communism kind of came prepackaged with atheism. Nazis worked with communists in the mid-1920s to fight the Catholic Center Party, because both of them wanted to undo democracy. And it finally came to the point where the anti-democracy people, the communists and the Nazis, outnumbered the pro-democracy people, and democracy fell. And then Hitler worked with the Catholics to destroy the communists, which they were more than happy to do since, communists are like atheists and all that stuff. So there was a claim at the time that Jews were communists. That's how they got them worked into a blood frenzy. Jews were part of the Bolshevik communist revolution. That's just false. They were not. They were social democrats, left-leaning, pro-union, and pro-social programs like pensions and things like that. Anyway, it was a really good political party, actually. This bit about them being communists is just Nazi propaganda from the era.
Trying to take over the country, both by force and at the ballot box. The Jews also ruled the biggest cultural forces of the time, which were often merged with academia, with the medical field, maximum infiltration for maximum effect.
That's just a lie. 0.8%. 525,000 Jews out of 60 or 65 million people. It fluctuated.
Sound familiar?
It's just a lie.
They would set their crosshairs on something. They would decide on something that they wanted to completely destroy, some sense of normalcy that they wanted to chip away at, and they'd legitimize it through phony academic and medical studies, just like they continue to do right now, today.
And who is they, I hear you asking? It's the Jews. The Jews are they. This is just straight up Nazi propaganda. I wonder where he heard this and why he accepts this, but not like Klemperer's diary entries, for example. Who told him this? Why are they a more legitimate source than like Klemperer or whoever else?
And one of the most disgusting, most revolting figures of the entire Weimar Republic was a man called Magnus Hirschfeld. Hirschfeld was a Jewish physician and self-proclaimed sexologist who pioneered transgenderism at his Berlin-based Institute for Sexual Research.
Sure. Okay, I suppose.
Hirschfeld himself was a homosexual. He was the
Hirschfeld. Oh my God, this drives me nuts. I'm sorry.
Hirschfeld himself was a homosexual. He was the father of transgenderism.
He was not the father of transgenderism. Being trans was something that existed in society for a long time. He just, the Weimar Republic was a democracy, and as such, you were much more free to express yourself and figure out how you feel about things and just live your own life generally. So trans people started to come out of the closet a little bit more than they were previously under the Weimar Republic. That does not mean, he was the pioneer of trans people or whatever the hell. I don't even know what that means. He was supportive of the trans community.
He's still hailed as a hero today by many a pervert.
Oh, he absolutely was, and he was not a pervert.
He was the first person to perform a male-to-female operation way back in...
I apologize for the, the slurs or anything. I'll cut them out later. But what he's saying, this operation or whatever, I believe that he didn't do it, but he, organized some operations to try to help trans people feel better about themselves, bring an end to their body dysphoria, their gender dysphoria. So, yeah, I suppose so.
1931, he castrated a gay guy who later died after a botched attempt to transplant a woman's uterus into his male body and allow him to carry a child.
I'm sure I don't need to say it, but this whole thing is hyperbolic or fabricated at best. I think that this surgery did happen. I don't remember the results of it, but Stu is just lying, obviously.
These same disgusting science fiction perversions that are being peddled to us today with the backing of the U.S. government and a bunch of perverted so-called doctors were being peddled to the Germans in the 1930s by their government and a bunch of perverted fake doctors.
Just fabricated.
Like Magnus Hirschfeld and the others who hung around his facility.
They're just made up.
Now, I'm going to ask you to just imagine for a moment how sick one has to be to actually be the guy to come up with all of this and then to actually do it to people, to carry it out.
I mean, he's claiming that the thing that people came up with and were doing was cutting pieces off of kids and stuff against their will. That's not what was happening. It was people who had body dysphoria or gender dysphoria, trying to find their way to alleviate their dysphoria and experience their life at maximal happiness. And that's what democracy is about, baby. Being maximally happy with the things that you are doing in your life and not being attacked or like derided or prevented from living your life by anybody else unless you're hurting somebody else. These people were not hurting anybody. They were simply being gay. At its heart, that's really what Stu is complaining about. Gay people. Heck off, Stu. Let people choose what they want. Right. This is one of Stu's like strategies. He says really graphic things unnecessarily. It's like when Marjorie Taylor Greene says that the Democrats want to, tear a baby out of blah, 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 when she's referencing abortion. Of course, that's like completely made up. Nobody is doing that. But getting super graphic with her description and claiming that Democrats are doing this whips people into a blood frenzy, and that's what Stu does. So anyway, he's certainly going to do a lot of that. Just like lie about people.
It's not a pleasant image to think about. But
and it's an unrealistic image, too.
Imagine this disgusting surgery. I mean, it's brutal today in 2024. It leads to permanent disfigurement. It leads to infection. It leads to death.
Like, this is just fictitious. This is not happening. This is not a problem. Everything that he's laying down is just like made up propaganda to whip people into a blood frenzy.
Just think of how hideous it was 90 years ago. Just think of how exactly perverted, how anti-human, how satanic this Hirschfeld Jew must have been to do something like this.
This Hirschfeld Jew, he says. Oh my God, dude. In the spirit of, like, understanding the full context of who Hirschfeld was, let me just read an excerpt from the book, The Coming of the Third Reich, by Richard J. Evans. Hold on. All right, here. Bringing Germany into line. Up to this moment in history, it's May 1933. Hitler ran against his political opponent, Paul von Hindenburg, in an election. And he was a protest vote. Nobody liked Hitler, except for like a few people. Like, it's a lot like MAGA today. And people were so unhappy with the choices that they voted for the protest vote. And Hitler actually lost that election. Paul von Hindenburg won. But as soon as von Hindenburg got into office, he appointed Hitler as chancellor, and Hitler held new elections for the Reichstag, for their Congress. Like, he ordered new elections be held. And that was supposed to happen March 1933. I don't remember what the date was when Hitler used the Enabling Act, but sometime, I think in March, he used the Enabling Act, which basically gave him complete control of the government, 100% complete control. It was intended for emergency situations, and he just took it and ran with it. Then he started doing like anti-Jewish legislation and things in April. Anyway, the anti-Jewish legislation starts heavily in April, and this is an account about May 1933. So the following month, basically, after Hitler really starts pushing anti-Jewish stuff. And only 2 months after he officially takes the reins of the country as a dictator. On the morning of May 6, 1933, a group of vans pulled up outside Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Science in the smart Tiergarten district of Berlin. Out of them leapt students from the Berlin School for Physical Education, members of the National Socialist German Students' League. National Socialist, of course, being Nazi. That's what Nazi is short for. So Nazis jumped out. They drew up in military formation. Then, while some of them took out their trumpets and tubas and started to play patriotic music, the others marched into the building. Their intentions were clearly unfriendly. Hirschfeld's Institute was well known in Berlin, not only for its championing of causes such as the legalization of homosexuality and abortion, and for its popular evening classes in sexual education, but also for its comprehensive collection of books and manuscripts on sexual topics, built up by the director since before the turn of the century. By 1933, it housed between 12,000 and 20,000 books, estimates vary, and an even larger collection of photographs on sexual subjects. The Nazi students who stormed into the Institute on May 6, 1933, proceeded to pour red ink over books and manuscripts, played football with framed photographs, leaving the floor covered in shards of broken glass, and ransacked the cupboards and drawers, throwing their contents onto the floor. 4 days later, More vans arrived, this time with stormtroopers. Stormtroopers was a nickname they gave to the brown shirts, like Hitler's paramilitary group, like the Proud Boys. More vans arrived 4 days later on March 10th. On May 10th. This time with stormtroopers carrying baskets into which they piled as many books and manuscripts as they could and took them out onto the Opera Square. Here they stacked them up in a gigantic heap and set light to them. About 10,000 books are said to have been consumed in the conflagration. I believe that this is the first, or one of the first, the biggest and most famous book burning event that sparked, no pun intended, a billion others across the country. As the fire burned on into the evening, the students carried a bust of the Institute's director, Hirschfeld, into the square and threw it into the flames. Told that the 65-year-old Hirschfeld was abroad recovering from an illness, the stormtroopers said, then hopefully he'll snuff it without us. Then we won't need to string him up or beat him to death. Hirschfeld didn't return to Germany. He died in 1935, suddenly at 67 years old, on his 67th birthday. That's kind of the story of Magnus Hirschfeld and the Sexology Institute. It was not a bad thing. It was phenomenally good. It was progressive for its time. People were learning things and studying things, and it was just normalizing being gay and all that. It's probably why Stu Peters is so infuriated by it.
And Weimar Germany was full of people like him.
Well, I mean, not really, not full of them, no.
They authored books on their alternative lifestyles that they hoped would one day become the norm. They produced heinous forms of pornography that were then plastered all over public spaces.
When he says heinous forms, he means like adult entertainment. It doesn't mean like heinous anything, actually. And what was that about them being plastered somewhere?
They produced heinous forms of pornography that were then plastered all over public spaces, sold cheaply and abundantly to distract and degrade the German people.
Yeah, I don't have any clue what he's talking about. This just sounds made up. There's a lot of political messaging and stuff all over in public, but I've never heard anything about like adult images being available. As a matter of fact, Germany was really serious about not like allowing kids to what's the word, like to not exposing kids to certain subjects, certain things. They just didn't think that they should be. So I seriously doubt the claim here.